Welcome to Charlie White Media Page. This is Unsung Issues, Episode 2, Black Women's Pain, How It Is Created, Consumed, and Felt. And this is Part 3, Black Women's Pain in Relation to White Men. And this one gets interesting because I'm joined on this panel, if you haven't seen this series already, by 3 other women. And one thing we have in common is that we're a diverse group of Black women from different backgrounds, different current family situations, different ages, different stages of life. But one thing we have in common is that we do not interact with white men on nearly the same level as we interact with pretty much anybody else. And I just think that's reflective of the way American society is. Now, what I'm saying is common for probably most Black women. There are exceptions, of course. There are Black women whose intimate partner is white, Black women who've been adopted into white families, or who, for whatever reason, their primary social circle is either really, really mixed or primarily white. There are some Black women who just have risen to levels of power where they occupy a space that's normally dominated by white men. And so they would have more interaction with white men than maybe some of the women on this panel. But I think what is probably most true for most Black women is that our primary interaction with white men has to do with us living in society where white men hold most of the power in politics, in corporate America, where they make up most of the law enforcement, where they're the gatekeepers of the entertainment industry, and you get the picture. We all have white men in our lives who we've interacted with in a positive way. We all do have white men in our lives, period. I didn't say that we didn't, but our primary interaction comes through this dynamic, this power dynamic. And so that is what frames the discussion that you're about to see. Now, it just so happens that the clip that we're going to share from Unsung the movie, because we are discussing issues in society that come up in Unsung the movie, reflects this particular dynamic. It reflects not so much of a close or deep social connection, but a Black woman who's experiencing pain due to and in relationship to a white male-dominated society. Now, there is a lot that we could say about the relationships between Black women and white men historically and presently in the United States. We are not going to get to cover everything, but I do hope you join us for the video and add to the discussion in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you about your own personal experiences. What do you think of the video? What are some things that we left out and we didn't get to talk about? I can think of a few things, quite honestly, but like I said, we only have but so much time, and I don't like to make super long videos, so I'm gonna cut to the chase. Please stick around, please comment and let us know what you thought and what you would add to this discussion if you had the chance. Thanks for joining us.
Y'all are now the property of the Jackson Plantation. I'll introduce you to Gabriel, who will show you to the cabins and to the field. It's harvesting time, so
Fields?
right to it.
I cook. I don't know nothing about picking cotton.
We already have a cook. Gabriel will teach you how to pick. Let's go.
So I feel like that particular portion of the film is significant in a lot of ways. One, because he's so nonchalant. Like I did have some people suggest that I make him a little bit more brash and, a little bit more offensive. But I really felt like it was important for this character to just be so comfortable in his power and his privilege that he just didn't feel the need to raise his voice. Like, he knows good and well this woman she can't do a thing to him. So, he's chill. He's got his mind on his money and his money on his mind. She's going to have to fall in line or there's going to be consequences, which we find out later. And I feel like this kind of probably captures more of the reality of the way we experience white men's power over us today. It's not, thankfully, it's not as much, when women were enslaved, when Black women were enslaved, it was, regularly sexual assault without consequence. And I know that still happens. But, in general, I feel like most of us are experiencing, either just being in a country that is still civically and economically dominated by white men, usually old white men, or in the workspace or in the education space, and just the reality that they don't just have power over us, they have power over our families, our children, our men was supposed to be our hedge of protection. So, that look between Gabriel and Andrew really captured that tension, because, he's protective. Gabriel already has a sense of being protective over her, but that dynamic is played out between just in a look that, look, I'll put my hand on my whip, boy, don't forget your place, kind of a thing. So what I wanted to ask you ladies, and you can just respond to that in general. Okay, how do you feel about the influence of a white patriarchal power structure over your life as a Black woman, whether direct or indirect? Do you feel that creates a direct or indirect sense of vulnerability for you? Do you think about white men's power? Like, where does that play out for you? Anybody can jump in.
I can.
Okay.
I've only it's been interesting. I've only experienced that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
The older I've gotten, like 47, 48 and older, up to 53.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't figure out for the life of me why that was so.
Mm.
And I had a cousin, I want to say I sent her, she wanted me to send her resume because I was speaking at a women's prayer time.
Mm-hmm.
So that she could just really pull some stuff out to be able to add to my bio.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, so I gave it to her, and we were talking later about a job opportunity that I had experienced. And I was just like, it just was so odd.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, there was absolutely no reason why I shouldn't have been able to get this job. I mean, it's like my resume said that I could probably do it with my eyes closed.
Mm.
And she looked at me and she said, Melody, I've seen your resume. And she said, here, kind of like where we live, it's like you can't look better or it's going to be a problem for you. And she said, your resume is so much beyond what a lot of people's resumes are, and they are in these other higher positions, that you are a threat to them and their position. And so I feel like that I've only been experiencing that, at a later stage in life when I have a ton of experience under my belt, and I'm engaging with people who might not have as much, or they may have, an adequate amount. It's not like there's anything wrong with the amount of knowledge and experience that they have. It's just that I become now a threat to them and their position. Could she possibly take over? Or would the board eventually want to choose her? Or would, the VP eventually want to choose her versus me? And so I've never experienced that, in my life. I was just like, and I think the reason that I never did was because I just didn't have enough. I might have on paper gone to college or gone to seminary and those kinds of things, but there are people in those environments that had their PhD, so I wasn't, but it only has been, at this stage in my life where I now have probably more than maybe even they are thinking maybe I should. And it is actually, it's a problem.
You guys, I just wanted to address what Melody said because we really didn't get a chance to do it the night we recorded. It was getting late. I think we just missed the ball, but it's really important. It's actually a perfect example of what Isabel Wilkerson is referring to when she describes America as a Caste System in her book. I recommend that you check out the link that I have below, discussing where she is discussing in an interview, and she's talking about her book and describing her experiences as a successful Black woman. I personally always say that the people I know who have the most difficulty with racism are either very poor or very low on the social strata of America, or they are at the highest point and they're very successful, very accomplished. And that's because the people who are very poor have no protection. The people who are very accomplished are constantly being reminded that they are not welcome in that space. And so Melody's experience, I think, is a perfect example that when she had done enough to earn access, for all that our people have done to give her a chance to earn that access, she still bucked up against the old established system, which is still dominated by white men, and where they still are in a position to grant or deny access in such a way that it favors them and protects their position. Because of course people are going to always want to protect themselves, and of course they're going to see people who are different from them as a threat, because they will not necessarily feel like they can make the social connections that will protect their position if that person is allowed to advance. So this is just another perfect example of what I was talking about in the introduction, how Black women can have otherwise limited contact with white men and they'll still have a significant effect on our lives. It is illustrated in the movie, in Clara's relationships with the white men in the movie. They are the people with whom she had the least regular contact, but the contact that she did have with them was in the context of them having a certain amount of power over her and being in a position to cause pain. And unfortunately, in American society, that position is still protected. So anyway, let's just get back to the discussion. I wanted to throw that in there because we really missed that opportunity. Would love to hear what you guys think in the comments below.
It's a problem.
Do you think, okay, I'm just going to throw this out there because you graduated from DTS, Dallas Theological Seminary. When you think about the way that theology is learned there, do you feel like there's a strong influence of white male patriarchal thinking that may affect what their emphases are, like what they think is important for you to learn?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yes. Aaron. I've talked enough.
Listen, I didn't finish school, but I went to another seminary similar to DPS, and I left in it, and I said I never want to go back.
Okay.
It was overwhelmed with white men. I was the only Black woman in my classes.
Lord have mercy.
And I kind of smirked when you said, you know, somebody answered, because I'm like, this relationship, this one of all of them is the most complex to me.
It is.
Because I have been led by white men in different capacities and cared for. I'll say that, you know, I feel like they genuinely care for me. But at the same time, like you talked about earlier, they can't see their privilege all the way. So there's things I just don't expect them to get, understand, or do ever. I adjust myself to the realization that they will never adjust themselves.
But they don't have to. What? I go throw that. I mean, I tell you where it's hitting me right now. You know, my church is technically a part of the Southern Baptist Convention. And, you know, I have pastors within my church and with our family of churches that are, you know, there to help promote change. I don't know, whatever you want to. That's a special ministry that they are called to, that I don't feel called to. Anyway, listen, when I hear some of these white theologians that I previously had so much respect for speaking on
oh my God,
racial tension, you know, that's when I feel it, because I'm like, see, these are the people.
yes.
If I want to go to seminary now, I gotta be over here scrutinizing. Who decided on this curriculum?
I done walked out on. I have walked out on them.
You know,
I hate here.
you see what I'm saying? Like it does. You're right. It's the most complicated relationship because it's not.
It's a problem.
Do you think? Okay, I'm just gonna throw this out there because you graduated from DTS, Dallas Theological Seminary.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about the way that theology is learned there, do you feel like there's a strong influence of white male patriarchal thinking that may affect what their emphases are, like what they think is important for you to learn?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Yes. Go ahead, Aaron. I've talked enough.
Listen, I didn't finish school, but I went to another seminary similar to DPS, and I left in it, and I said I never want to go back.
Okay.
It was overwhelmed with white men.
Mm.
I was the only Black woman in my classes,
Lord have mercy.
and I kind of smirked when you said, somebody answered, because I'm like, this relationship, this one of all of them is the most complex to me.
It is.
Because I have been led by white men in different capacities and cared for. I'll say that, I feel like they genuinely care for me. But at the same time, like you talked about earlier, they can't see their privilege all the way. So there's things I just don't expect them to get, understand, or do ever. I adjust myself to the realization that they will never adjust themselves.
But they don't have to. What? I go throw that. You're right. It's the most complicated relationship because it's not as direct as slave master and slave anymore. But white men's power and white men's gaze looms heavy over our lives.
Yes.
It's why Black beauty has not been fully platformed and promoted and appreciated for so long because white men decided that white women were prettier and they should have the cover. And I don't feel it like on a daily basis looming heavily over me, but we all run in to the point I don't think we necessarily think about it. But the reality is there are decisions affecting our lives as Black women on a regular basis that might be creating either extra work for us. If you want to go to a seminary and you want to find one where you can, be in a welcoming space, or creating sensitivities, whether it be, us having to fight to sort of create a more inclusive beauty standard. Those things do trickle down from white male patriarchy. It's just, it may not be as direct, but I see it and I feel it. And it's the little things, the little microaggressions, the little, death by 1,000 cuts type things that just come from us being in a white male dominated society.
And I think it's the problem for me because I just refuse to deal with it. I refuse to address it. I remember in high school, I went to predominantly white high school, and I was after school one day. I was doing something with an after school club, and I walked by a group of white boys, and I heard one of them say, and I was by myself. I heard one of them say "nigger," and I was just like, I really don't have time. He ain't talking to me. And that's the story of my life.
Right. We don't have time. We don't have time for all of it. Facts. Yeah, so that pretty much sums it up. I mean, that's sometimes what we have to do in order to just keep it moving, is not dwell on the things that are not immediately in our control. That being said, just deciding that we don't have the time to think about it doesn't keep these things from still being in effect. It doesn't keep these things from coming back to us and affecting our lives. and we don't want our children to have to deal with these things. So it is important for us as an entire society to do away with these systems and the inequities that are really a holdover from colonial society. America is not in its infancy anymore. It has reached its age of accountability, and it is high time for everyone in America to be able to make it in this country based upon their merits. I do hope that recent movements are an indication that we are moving in that direction. But even if we are not, we will continue to fight because we have no other choice. Black women always have found a way to rise above the tide that is trying to bring us down. That being said, it gets exhausting. And so I do hope that this platform has been something that is an encouragement to other Black women so that they can be reminded that they're not alone. I hope that if you're not a Black woman and you're watching this to learn something, that you really have learned something and that it has somehow opened your mind to other people's experiences and feelings. Please check out www.unsungthemovie2020.com. You can watch Unsung the Movie, you can support by buying merchandise, see other bonus materials. You can also watch the film right here on Charlie White Media YouTube page, and all of that information is in the notes below this video, along with other resources that will give you some more insight into some of the things that we were only able to touch on in the brief time that we had. Thanks for joining us. Please stay tuned for Unsung Issues, Episode 2, Black Women's Pain, How It Is Created, Consumed, and Felt, Part 4, Black Women's Pain in relationship to Black men. So I hope you join us, and we look forward to hearing from you in the comments with anything you'd like to add to this discussion. Bye.